There is a moment in every man's life when the weight of the world shifts. It happens quietly, sometimes in the middle of the night, sometimes in the middle of a breakup, sometimes when he's staring into the mirror, wondering why he still feels like a boy wearing a man's face. And sometimes it happens when he learns he's going to become a father. That moment is the threshold. Carl Jung believed that life unfolds in great transitions, each marked by an inner summons, a call from the unconscious, from the deeper self, asking a man to grow beyond who he has been so far. Fatherhood is one of the greatest of these summons, but young men are rarely taught how to answer that call. This is the story of a young man who learned how, and this is the guide you were never given, the one that Jung wrote between the lines of his life's work, the one hidden inside the psyche of every man who is ready to step into his next becoming. Before a man becomes a father, he must confront someone he spent most of his life ignoring, his own shadow. Jung described the shadow as the rejected parts of ourselves, our anger, our fear, our insecurity, our pettiness, our need for validation, our resentment, our weakness, our yearnings, our compulsions, our hidden wounds. The shadow contains everything we deny or suppress in order to appear strong, competent, or worthy. Our story begins with a young man named Elias. Though he could be any man, you, your friend, your brother, or the man you might become. Elias grew up believing that to be a man, he must be invulnerable. His father never cried. His teachers told him to toughen up. His girlfriend said he was too emotionally distant. And he, like many young men, mistook emotional silence for strength. He wore his composure like armor, but deep inside, he felt something tightening, a pressure he didn't understand, a restlessness, a dissatisfaction with himself and the world. This restlessness, Jung said, is the shadow trying to speak. One night, after a long day of work, Elias found himself staring at the ceiling, thinking, I don't know who I am becoming. And that was the moment the shadow began to move. Because beneath the surface, a man senses when he is not living at his full height. The shadow whispers, you are more than the persona you are pretending to be. You are not just the boy who learned to hide his pain. You are not destined to repeat the mistakes of your father. And most importantly, you must face me before you can guide anyone else through life. That night marked the beginning of Elias's descent, the heroic descent Jung believed every man must take. Not into darkness, but into self-awareness, the only place where transformation begins. Chapter 2: The Call to Responsibility. Months later, Elias received news that would change everything. He was going to be a father. The world seemed to slow. His heart raced, joy mixed with terror. He thought, how can I raise a child when I'm still figuring out how to be a man? This question is universal. Jung once wrote that no man becomes whole without accepting responsibility for something beyond himself. For some men, it is a mission. For others, a community. But for many, the moment is fatherhood. Responsibility is not a burden, it is a birthplace. But young men fear responsibility because it exposes the gap between who they are and who they must become. Elias began to feel that gap widening. He worked, but without purpose. He existed, but without direction. He loved, but without depth. Now, life demanded more of him. A child brings a mirror, one that reflects not only who you are, but what you lack. A child does not simply inherit your blood. He inherits your unfinished business, your unhealed wounds, your anxiety, your impatience, your numbness, your hopes, and your shadows. Elias felt this truth instinctively, and so he asked the question that begins every transformation: what must I change? Chapter 3: The Father Wound. Every father-to-be must confront another truth. No man starts from zero. We inherit patterns, some empowering, some destructive. Jung called this the psychic inheritance, a kind of emotional DNA passed from parent to child. Elias's father was a silent man, hard-working, stern, always providing but never present. He loved through duty, not affection. He taught Elias discipline, structure, and perseverance, but not tenderness, not emotional understanding, not vulnerability. And so Elias grew into a man who knew how to endure life, but not how to feel it. Many young men carry this same wound. Jung believed the father wound can manifest in two ways. The absent father creates the lost son. The overbearing father creates the fearful son. Either way, the son grows with a part of himself missing. To heal, a man must do the unthinkable. He must become the father he never had. One evening, Elias picked up a journal and wrote, "I don't want my child to feel the distance I felt. I want to be present, but I don't know how." That confession was the beginning of healing. The father wound dissolves not through blame, but through awareness. A man cannot rewrite his past, but he can choose what parts of it he carries forward. And that choice is what separates a father from merely a man. Chapter 4: The Inner King. Jung believed every man carries 4 archetypes within him: the king, the warrior, the magician, the lover. But modern men rarely develop them in balance. The boy grows into a warrior, competitive, driven, hungry, afraid of weakness. But to become a father, he must awaken the king, the part of a man that brings order, vision, stability, and blessing. A king is not a ruler who dominates others. A king is a man who rules himself. Elias had never met his inner king. He knew the warrior, the part of him that pushed through exhaustion, worked late nights, suppressed emotion, fought for approval. But he did not know the part that could create peace within himself. One night, while walking home through the quiet streets, Elias imagined the kind of father he wanted to be. Not perfect, not heroic, not authoritative, but centered, present, grounded, wise. This is the moment Jung described as contact with the self, the deep center of the psyche that reveals a man's true potential. The king archetype awakens when a man asks, "What do I stand for? What values will guide my child? What kind of world will I create in my home? Who must I become to protect what truly matters?" These questions build a man from the inside out, and without realizing, Elias had already begun the initiation. Chapter 5: The Hero's Descent. Every transformation requires a descent into the unconscious. For Elias, this came through dreams. He began having recurring dreams of a storm, of standing in a forest, of holding a lantern whose flame flickered wildly in the wind. Jung believed dreams reveal the truths we are not yet ready to confront consciously. The storm symbolized chaos, the pressures of adulthood, expectations, responsibility. The forest symbolized the unknown parts of himself. The lantern symbolized his emerging awareness, fragile but present. In one dream, the lantern extinguished and Elias stood in total darkness. He felt panic rise in his chest, but then, from the shadows, he heard a voice, not threatening, but familiar. You cannot guide a child through darkness you refuse to walk through. He woke up with tears on his pillow. That dream cracked something open. We cannot protect our children from the darkness we haven't explored. We cannot teach them emotional strength without feeling our own emotions. We cannot give them wisdom we haven't earned. Elias understood. Before he could be a father, he first had to finish becoming a man. And that begins with confronting the parts of himself that frightened him the most. Chapter 6. The Emotional Awakening. Jung wrote that emotional repression is one of the greatest sources of suffering in men. Men are taught, don't cry, don't complain, don't be weak, don't talk about feelings, don't ask for help. But a father's emotional unavailability becomes a child's emotional insecurity. A father who never learned to express love raises children who never learn to receive it. Elias realized this when he visited his father one afternoon. He watched the old man repair a fence, hands weathered, face serious, body stiff with decades of labor. Elias knew his father loved him, but that love had always been locked behind silence. And suddenly, Elias felt something shift. He saw not a distant man, but a man who had never been given permission to feel. A man trapped inside a generation that equated vulnerability with failure. A man who had carried the burdens of life alone because he never knew there was another way. Elias felt compassion for the first time, not resentment. He approached his father and said quietly, "Dad, did you ever feel scared before I was born?" His father froze. Then, after a long silence, he whispered, "Every day." This moment shattered decades of emotional distance. For the first time, Elias saw his father as human, imperfect, vulnerable, afraid, aspiring, trying. And within that realization came a truth. A man becomes a father the moment he forgives the child he used to be. Chapter 7. The Responsible Man. Jung believed that responsibility is not simply obligation, it is the foundation of meaning. Modern young men often fear responsibility because they see it as loss. Loss of freedom, loss of spontaneity, loss of youth, loss of self. But responsibility does not shrink a man, it expands him. The moment Elias accepted that he was going to be a father, something inside him straightened. His spine metaphorically lengthened, his posture changed, his mind sharpened. Responsibility did not burden him, it clarified him. He began organizing his life. He cut out distractions. He set financial goals. He cleaned his apartment. He read books on psychology and parenting. He started therapy. But more importantly, he began asking deeper questions. What beliefs will I pass down? How will I teach my child about love? How do I model calm instead of chaos? What does strength truly mean? This kind of introspection is rare in young men, but it is necessary. A father does not give his child a perfect life. A father gives his child a guided life.
and guidance requires self-governance.
Chapter 8. The masculine and the feminine within. Jung believed that every man carries an inner feminine, the anima, and every woman carries an inner masculine, the animus. These are psychological forces that shape emotion, intuition, creativity, and connection. Most young men grow up disconnected from their anima. They reject sensitivity, intuition, tenderness, and vulnerability out of fear of judgment. But a father who cannot access his inner feminine becomes emotionally rigid. Elias encountered his anima in another dream. He found himself standing at the edge of a river, watching a woman in a white dress collecting water. Her face was calm, her movements fluid. He asked her, "Who are you?" She replied, "I am everything you silence." When he looked down, he realized he was holding a crying infant. The woman placed her hand on Elias's chest and said, "Your child will cry. Will you know how to comfort him? Or will you run from the emotions you never learned to face?" He woke up, shaking. This revelation was necessary. A child needs a father who can be strong and tender, firm and compassionate, grounded and emotionally present. Elias understood. If he wanted his child to feel safe expressing emotions, he must first learn to feel his own. Chapter 9. Rebirth. The final stage of Jung's process of individuation is rebirth, the emergence of a new identity built upon integrated parts of the psyche. This rebirth rarely happens in one moment. Rather, it builds slowly until an event crystallizes it. For Elias, that moment came when he felt his unborn child kick for the first time. He placed his hand on his partner's belly and felt the soft thump of life. It was like a spark ignited in him. He felt his fear dissolve. He felt his doubts quiet. He felt his purpose solidify. Jung wrote that meaning is born when something transcends the ego. A child is one of the most profound transcendences a man can experience. At that moment, Elias understood. He was no longer living only for himself. He was becoming a link in a generational chain. He was stepping into a role older than civilization, the role of father. Chapter 10. The final guidance. Jung would say that no man is ever fully ready to become a father, but readiness is not the requirement. What matters is willingness. The willingness to grow. The willingness to confront the shadow. The willingness to heal generational wounds. The willingness to love deeply. The willingness to show up consistently. The willingness to provide not just resources, but presence. Fatherhood is not a destination. It is a becoming, a lifelong psychological journey. And so here are the life lessons Elias learned, the ones every young man must know before becoming a father. 1. Heal yourself so your child doesn't inherit your wounds. Unhealed trauma does not disappear, it transfers. 2. Responsibility is not a burden. It is what makes life meaningful. Purpose begins where selfishness ends. 3. Strength is not the absence of emotion,
but the mastery of it. Your child will learn emotional regulation from watching you. 4. The father you become is shaped by the father you reconcile with, whether present or absent. Forgiveness frees you from repeating patterns. 5. Your presence is more valuable than your perfection. Children do not need flawless fathers. They need fathers who try. 6. The king within you must awaken, not a ruler of others, but a ruler of yourself, your values, your boundaries, your integrity. 7. The story of your life becomes the blueprint your child studies. Live a story worth inheriting. Months later, Elias held his newborn child for the first time. The world fell silent. The hospital lights blurred. The weight of the infant in his arms felt like destiny. Tears rose, not from fear, but from the recognition of a truth he had sought his entire life. He had become the man he needed when he was younger, and he would now become the father his child deserved. Not perfect, not fearless, not all-knowing, but awake, grounded, present, growing, and that is enough. Jung teaches us that the greatest journey a man can take is the journey inward, because the man who understands himself becomes the father who can guide another soul through the world. This is not just a story, it is an initiation, a reminder, a map. A young man becomes a father the moment he decides, the cycle ends with me, the healing begins with me, the future starts with me.